I'm Dr. George Castro, and I'm Emeritus Professor of Chemistry, retired from San Jose State. And prior to that, I spent 27 years at IBM Research Labs here in San Jose, California. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, first in South Central, and then later on moving to some of the suburbs around Los Angeles, including places like Norwalk and other little towns around L.A. My parents' family came from Mexico, from a little part of Zacatecas that's very close to Guadalajara, and much of those people came to L.A. And the surrounding areas during the 1910 to 20 era, and my dad's family came in 1922. My mother's family came from Chihuahua, from a city called Parral, and on the way to California, they lived a few years in El Paso, and that's where my mother was born. But in a Mexican barrio called Segundo Barrio, where everybody spoke Spanish, and they came in 1914 to Los Angeles. Okay. Now I went to elementary school starting in South Central. There was an elementary school called San Pedro Elementary School on San Pedro Street near Washington Boulevard, a block away from there. We lived in that neighborhood when I was a little smaller. In fact, a block away from the school, that was the house that I was born in. But I started kindergarten in another school near the Coliseum in Los Angeles, and that was Vermont Elementary School. I just went there one semester. Then we moved back to the old neighborhood, and I went to San Pedro. That was a typical. The majority of the kids were Mexicano. Actually, they were Chicano. Most of the people were of Mexican descent, but they came from other states, notably Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. That they had come to Los Angeles in the 1930s, into that neighborhood. Very few from Mexico, actually. Maybe one or two kids in my class were from Mexico, but you could count the Texans and the New Mexicans. All they were there, and a lot from California too. Now, just to tell you some of the things that propelled me toward a academic track was actually started fairly early. In the second grade, a teacher had a spelling bee. Lined up half a class on one end and lined up the other ones, and we started to spell. And I just spelling like anybody else, and actually when it was all over, I was by myself. I just wanted. Gee, they thought it was something. I went up to the 5th grade into that school, in the L.A. school. Then my family moved out to Norwalk, which is a suburb. And there they put me back a semester because they didn't have an A and B. Everybody started in September, and they finished school in June. So they put me back in September, and I was way ahead of that class. And that class was very different. There were no Mexicanos in that class at all. They were mostly people from Oklahoma, and most of them had come to Southern California during the 1940 late 30s. The late 30s they worked the crops, but in the 40s they came to work in the aircraft industries, and they did pretty well. And those who came in the 30s, of course, they got they got drafted if they were, of age and served time in the war. And they came out and they bought what we call GI homes. They could buy a home with almost no money down with low interest rate because they were GI. So there were a lot of GI homes in that area, and a lot of Okies, and a few Japanese. I think in that class I was the only Mexicano. They were all white, mostly white. But anyway, I was so far ahead of that class that they had me tested, and then so they after the test they bumped me up a full grade, and that meant going to a middle school instead of the elementary school. Then we moved back to Los Angeles, but not to South Central. We moved to East Los Angeles. And I went to Hollenbeck Junior High School. I went to that school, and that was in East L.A. That was primarily a Chicano school, maybe 60%, 65% Chicano. Then there was about the rest of it. Well, there's an unusual group there called the White Russians. That was about 5%, and they stuck to themselves. They socialized with themselves. They all went to the same church. They all more or less lived in the same neighborhood. So I didn't know much about them until high school, but they were there at the junior high school. And when I came back to LA, they didn't have a middle school. They had a junior high that went from 7 to 9. Then about maybe 30% of that school was split between Japanese and Jewish students. And there were no white students at all in that school. All the classes I had were primarily with other Mexican students and a few black students in that neighborhood. And I would only have the classes with the Jewish and Japanese in gym, where the whole grade met together. It was like, I knew they were there, but I didn't have classes with them. I didn't know them. And that was in the 8th grade. And I went there for the beginning semester. Then my family moved again. We moved to El Monte, which, again, I find myself in a white school, in a middle school. And unlike the junior high, where you had different periods where you went to different classes, this was a single classroom in El Monte. And there was one other Latino in my class, and that was a real pretty girl. So she stood out. Well, in that school, again, because they were more rural type of people, I was way ahead of them. And the teacher was preparing us to go to high school. She says, next year you're all going to 9th grade in high school, and you probably should take algebra. So I'm gonna teach you a little bit of algebra. And so it was interesting. We got this algebra. We were eating it up. Then my family moved again at the end of that semester, and we went back, a different neighborhood, but the same junior high school that I left. And now high school starts in the 10th grade, so I'm still in junior high. So anyway, when I go there, I told them I want to take algebra. They said, why do you want to take algebra? The counselor. Well, we were getting ready to do it, and I liked it. And, are you sure you can handle it? All that stuff. Yeah, let me try it. Yeah. So I took algebra. In the same school that I was there a year ago, everything changed. I didn't have Mexicano kids in my classes anymore. Certainly not in algebra. They were all Jewish and Japanese. No black, no Mexican, even though that was a predominantly Mexican school. not only algebra, but all my other classes, my social studies classes, all this, they're the same, Jewish and Japanese. And then I found out there's something called a track, that these kids are designated academic. They're going on to college. That's what they were saying in the 9th grade. And the Mexicanos were in industrial arts. And then there was mixed in the third one, which was commercial, which you would take things like typing. And these tracks continued on to high school. Next year when I graduated, I would go to the high school, and I tell the counselor, I want to be academic. And he didn't want me to be academic. He said, you really belong in the industrial arts. He was a racist guy, and his name is William Pencava. I still remember that guy, because how he spoke to me, I found out he spoke to a lot of my friends. And some of them wanted to be academic, and he talked them out of it. Anyway, I didn't like him. I didn't like his face. I didn't like him trying to tell me. So I just dug in my heels. I said, I'm doing the work, and algebra and all the other stuff. I want to stay an academic. And he says, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put you on probation to show me that you can get B's and C's in these courses you're taking. So it sounds fine to me. But so anyway, that was the first time in my life I just want to see the look on his face. So my first semester in high school, I got straight A's just to do it, just to see it. When I showed him, when we met again to do the second semester, I just enjoyed saying, oh, you can obviously do the work, you know. And so he never brought it up again. And so in high school, I got in the academic track. And all my classmates were, again, Jewish and Japanese, you know, real studious people. And the first thing I found out, number one, they were no smarter than me. But what they did that I wasn't used to doing, they did all their homework. They just did it as a matter of fact. And they did it nice. They would type it up, put a piece of onion skin in it, you know. I still handwritten, but they weren't any smarter than me. And I kept my Chicano friends that I had met, but I didn't have them in my class. And actually, you could do no wrong if you're an academic. The expectations were high, and the grades were, they expect you to get A's, so they gave you A's. We would go check out books from the library. We would walk a mile. So we all read. My older brother, he didn't show a great interest, but, you know, he could do it. There wasn't that much difference in it. But when he hit high school, he got a part-time job and got a car right away. And that led to girls and stuff like that. And so he was into dancing and girls, and he got married 2 months after he graduated from high school. I mean, just, you know, it's just totally, and that was typical for most of the guys around there. It wasn't unusual for the guys and the girls to get married right away. Get a job at Sears and buy themselves a new car, and then, you know, go rent a house and start making kids left and right. And my brother started doing that. And that was a shame, because he regretted it all his life. As he saw me and my other brother, we went directly into college. So I was the first one in my family, or my cousins, you know, my uncles. Nobody had ever gone to college. We didn't know anything about it, but we knew that. And I found out that UCLA was free at that time. It was free. There was no tuition. You could go for free. Actually, all state colleges were free. All community colleges were free. There were no tuition. You just show up. You have to pay for your books. I went to UCLA on $5 a week. And my mother would give me $5. I had a car. I'd fill up the tank for about $4, which would last me the week, and I had $1 left over. And with that, I would take a lunch. I could buy a soda. I mean, that's how cheap it was. Now, I got a scholarship from a group of guys, which was started by the later Congressman Ed Roybal. It was called Los Romanos. It started off with an English name, the old Roman Boys Club, and then they changed it to Los Romanos. And they gave a $200 scholarship to a Mexican-American kid to Roosevelt High School, which is the high school I went to. And so I won that scholarship. And so that paid my books and stuff for 2 years. The books were $5 and $6. So I had that $200 scholarship. I could always get the books against it. So college was pretty easy financially. Sociologically, it was quite difficult for me because of moving from the barrio to something that was going to lead to a professional life was something I didn't understand. I mean, I like the barrio. I like my friends, you know. I like frijoles menudo. If I become a professional scientist and live with white people and have to live with, you know, eat their food and stuff, you know, I was mixed up on that. But it was a time to be in science. Right after I started college, the Russians launched this first satellite called Sputnik. Especially that all of a sudden we used to be eminent #1 in science and engineering in the world. How could these Russians beat us and have a satellite, and first thing they're going to do is going to put a bomb on it, you know, for sure. So anyway, the focus on science led to the very, very first college loan to students by the government. This was started in 1957. And the scholarship came from the Department of Defense. Congress passed the bill, National Defense Education Act, scholarships for kids who study science and engineering. That was the first one. And so in my junior year, they gave me $400 just for asking, and then said that I can pay it back after I graduate over a 10-year period at a percentage of 3%. So I partied and bought books, you know, with that thing. But that was a break. Okay. I said, well, I'm going to go in the Army, so I'm getting this degree in chemistry, which I actually like chemistry. I like physics too, but I didn't particularly like the teachers in the physics department at UCLA. I didn't see why I had to kill myself to get A grades. So I just did what I had to do. I graduated with a GPA of about like 2.7, which is just kind of the minimum. But I was lucky that they were opening up a new graduate school in Riverside. And one of the graduate students at UCLA came from Riverside, and he was always telling us about it and told us about the graduate school. I didn't know much about it, but a professor came and they introduced. I got introduced to him, and the graduate student told him, "This guy's pretty smart, but he doesn't work very hard at it. But he's pretty smart." And then they told me about the graduate school and the opportunity, and I said, "Sounds better than the Army." And then he said, "Yeah, and we will pay you to go to graduate school." Yeah. You pay? I mean, I don't pay you. It's free. Yeah, and not only is it free, we pay you $300 a month. I almost flipped. Yeah. And they invited me to go to Riverside and talk to all the professors and who were doing something, and met a bright guy, and he says, yeah, I'd like to hire you. You come over here and you'll be my research assistant. And you'll get $300, and we have dorms here you could live, and wow. So, but one of the other professors says, but you need to get your grades up. You know, you got one semester to go. Show us that you can get some A's and B's. And so I did. I was motivated, just like the counselor back in the high school. So, you know, I got them their A's and B's. And then I hit graduate school. I loved it. I loved doing research. I loved it that with a little learning, I could be at a stage where everybody else who's trying to work on this problem is at the same place, and nobody has any advantage. Maybe they have better equipment, but you know, research, you're trying to tackle a hard problem. And I was lucky that I picked a, and